So if you guys have ever watched us build outdoor furniture, you know there are three things that we hit on with almost every outdoor project. That's material selection, glue selection, and finish. And the whole point of those three topics is to make sure that your outdoor project is going to last for years to come. And this bench is a great example of that. This bench was built by the guys back in season 7 of the Woodsmith Shop. And over the last 4 years, it has lived on my front step at my house. Now it is covered and it doesn't get a ton of direct sun, but it gets a couple of hours of sun in the morning. And it's pretty sheltered from rain, but blowing snow does kind of pile up there. And you can see over the last 4 years, this went from looking like a brand new fresh bench to one that definitely needs some love. And that's what we're gonna do today. When you're looking at outdoor finishes, you're really looking at blocking the UV rays from the sun. Yeah, water damage will cause some issues, but a good quality finish is going to mainly inhibit the UV rays that are really going to damage stuff. And like I said, this bench is a perfect example. Looking at the top, it's kind of dry and fuzzy. It's very pale. There's none of the finish left on it, really, and I haven't touched this thing yet. But if you look underneath here to where there is areas that are shaded and never get sun, there's definitely some finish still on there. So it's a great way to kind of show how UV damage, when it hits a flat surface, will really cause some issues. So when you are building an outdoor furniture project, you do want to consider the finish that you're using and how you're going to maintain it. Now, I don't know exactly what was used on this bench originally, so we're going to go ahead and strip this down to bare wood. But something like paint or an outdoor oil can be applied layer over layer throughout the years. That way you don't have to go through the stripping process. So let me go ahead and get this bench off of the bench, put some cardboard and some paper down, then we'll talk about stripping this. Okay, so it looks like most of the finish that's left on here is some form of film finish, like I said. So a couple of ways you can get through that. I could sand it down, but with film finishes, it takes too long, and you go through a lot of sandpaper because the sandpaper tends to load up with the film finish, and it's not effective, so you end up changing your sandpaper a lot. So instead, what I like to do, if I need to get rid of the film finish, is to use this stuff, or some form of this, and this is just a chemical stripper. So this, you paint it on, wait 10-15 minutes, and it will kind of reactivate whatever finish is on there, and then you can scrape it away. There's a couple of important things to note about this stuff, though. Don't use foam brushes because it will dissolve them. And on that note, there's a lot of fumes that come off with it, so make sure you're doing outside or with proper ventilation. And once the film finish or whatever finish you're putting it on has been dissolved, you're going to want somewhere to scrape it, which is why I have cardboard down instead of just standard craft paper. As this stuff dissolves the finish, I'm going to scrape it off and I'll just wipe it on the cardboard and the cardboard will be disposed of. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in a bowl so I can brush it on. And this stuff is a kind of a gel. So when you paint it on, it will kind of stay where you put it. And then I'm just going to use a cheap paintbrush and we'll just kind of paint this on. And the areas that I'm really going to concentrate on are those areas that haven't really been exposed to much sun. So those areas that do have some film finish left on them, we'll hit those ones the hardest and just kind of give the rest a light glossing over. So after the chemical stripper has had a chance to soften the finish that is on here, I can come back with a putty knife. And really you're just going to scrape off whatever stripping chemicals are left along with any softened finish that's on there. There may not be a ton, and areas where it's been completely worn through will actually start to dry out pretty quickly. But you're going to do your best to scrape off as much finish on there as you can. And then most forms of chemical strippers will have an after wash. And this is just something you apply to a rag and you wipe down the surface everywhere you applied the stripping chemical. And what this does is it removes any of the excess chemical that has been left on the surface and kind of coagulated and gummed up. And it also helps remove any of that loose finish that's still on there. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe down this entire bench. And then I'm gonna sand it. And like I said, I'm gonna hit it with probably 150, 180 grit. And then I'll show you guys one of my favorite outdoor finishes that you can apply over top without having to remove the old finish. All right, so here we are the next day. I let that afterwash kind of flash off and really let it dry so I could come back and sand it. And I've sanded down to bare wood, and I just sanded it with 180 grit, and then came back to some of those detail areas with a little sanding block and just kind of touched them up. The goal here is to get back down to bare wood. But now that we're at that point, this is ready for a new outdoor finish. So what finish do I like to apply to outdoor projects? Well, to be honest with you, paint is probably the best. It's going to last the longest and offer the most protection. But with a white oak bench like this, I would feel bad painting it, so I'm not going to paint this guy. Instead, what I like to do on outdoor furniture that I want the wood to show through is to apply an outdoor oil. Something like this guy here, which is teak oil. And there's a couple reasons I like this. First, like I mentioned, it lets the wood show through. So it's really just like adding an oil finish to the top of the wood. And the other reason that I really like it is the ease of reapplication and actually applying it right now. With most outdoor oils, you just flood it on, let it soak in for 15 or 20 minutes, and then you come back and wipe it off with a rag. You don't want anything to pool up on the surface. So the application is super easy and super straightforward. And a couple years down the road when this is ready for another application, you don't have to go through all the scuffing process or anything. You can just reapply the oil, let it soak in, wipe it off, and it'll look just as good as it did when you applied it originally. So one of the things I really like about outdoor oil is that it is extremely hard to screw up. Really, the only way you can mess it up is by allowing it to pool and dry on the surface. That's why we come back with a rag and wipe it down, make sure there's no shiny spots left. And if it does dry on the surface in a pool, it's probably gonna stay pretty tacky, and then you'll just have to come back with some mineral spirits or solvent and wipe that down and maybe re-sand it and re-oil it. But overall, I think that is a really nice finish on this bench. And it should last for a couple years before I need to reapply the oil to it. So if you've built some outdoor projects and they're looking a little down in the dumps, spend some time with them, sand them down, apply some stripper, get that old finish off, and give them a new finish, and they'll look just as good as the day you've made them.